All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, let me make one more adjustment here.
Morning, Scott.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, let me find where is oh, here we go. It's a little bit different than Zoom, the normal Zoom. That's why okay. All right. So today I want to talk about core. Let me get another light here. Okay, core strength. If anyone has a question at some point, feel free to ask. Oh, let me get this a little bit higher. And because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about core strength. So first thing I want to go over in terms of core strength is, what is the purpose of core strength? Number one, it is to not only strengthen your midsection, but why do you want a strong midsection? The whole point of a strong midsection is to stabilize the spine. Now, for a lot of us, we have structural issues that have developed over time as a result of, being at a desk all the time. And then, of course, for a lot of us, we're born with structural issues. I was a child, I was climbing a tree. I think I was about 5 years old. And I was moving across and the tree branch broke and I literally fell on a sawhorse right here. And I hyperextended my back when I landed. And I really think from that point on, that is the reason why I have lordosis, which is the arching of my lower back. And I've worked on it a lot to sort of offset it with training and core strength. But there is more of an arch with me than the average population. I could even see pictures of me when I'm a kid, prior to me falling on the sawhorse, and you can literally see a difference with my spine. So there are things that happen to us in life that
A core strength thing. I don't know if they can hear me or not.
Who?
It's the Redwood City.
Everything okay?
People need to mute.
Oh, can anyone hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Let me mute.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure you heard me. Yeah, so there are things that happen, over time in life that will adversely affect your structure. And then there are structural things you're born with. So every little bit that you do will help your situation, whether it was a trauma that you've received in life versus having a structural issue from birth, okay? So what do the abdominal muscles do? They stabilize the spine. They help keep the spine in the right, what we call neutral position. Now, for a lot of people, the reason why you see some structural issues or some shape there that curves, a lot of times it's just because there isn't enough strength in somebody's abdominal muscles. So what I want to do today, I want to teach some functional strength that you can gain, that you can do at home. And like I've done in the past, I want to really focus on the simple, and then we'll move to the higher level or the more complex, okay? So like I said, if you have any questions at any point during this, please ask me, because it's much easier to address some of these questions as they're happening rather than just later. Okay, first thing I would suggest, there's really, two core exercises that I think are really important. The plank, to me, is the most important, because not only do you have to have good strength in your abdominals, but you have to have the ability to sustain a muscle contraction to actually do it. So you have to have some muscular endurance. So this is my go-to assessment for people. If someone can't properly do a plank, I don't have them lift any weights or do any complex movements yet. Because if you can't properly execute a plank for 30 seconds, then you're not ready to do any real lifting. So first, I'm going to show you the simplest, easiest way to do a plank, especially for those of you that don't want to get on the mat or on the ground. And then I'll show you the more advanced version for the hard style version, which is the one I do. So I'm gonna move a couple mats around and I'm gonna show you how to do what we call a modified plank with a chair and a wall. So let me grab a few mats and get them out of the way. All right. Okay. All right, I'm gonna turn this towards the wall just because it's much easier to see what I'm doing here. I'm gonna bring this down a level. I don't mean to make anyone dizzy. I apologize if I do. All right. Okay, here's a chair. Now, the key to this, of course, now my head's cut off. That's a little better. Okay, you see, all you need is a chair. Now, keep in mind, you do need a stable chair. Because if the chair is kind of flimsy, there's a chance the chair doesn't hold you up or something happens, it breaks. So make sure you have a steady chair. Now, the key to this is you want to be able, and I guess I should show you from this angle, that's probably better. So the key to this is you want to make sure the chair is securely against the wall. Now, what you have to be able to do is straighten your arms. You want straight legs. You want to engage your abdominal muscles, your butt muscles, and also your triceps. So this is what we call a full plank, but we do it from a modified position. Now I can feel my abs, I can feel my triceps, everything is fully engaged here. Okay, now when this starts to get easier, you can lift an arm up, lift the other arm up. But make sure you maintain constant contact with the chair and your feet should be on the ground, okay? Now, that is an entry level plank that pretty much anyone can do. Anybody that's ambulatory could actually do that plank, okay? Now, I'm gonna switch it up just a little bit and show you the more advanced version, which is what we call the hard style version. So I'm gonna move this right over here. And down a bit, I'm gonna put a mat down. All right, getting into focus here. All right, so hard style plank. Now, this is a really crucial one. Before we get into the hard style plank, another exercise that you can do it's good for your core strength. Believe it or not, it's crawling. So crawling works really good for a variety of reasons. It trains that back half of your body, your butt, your hamstrings. Now, if you notice, see how my toes are engaged? I don't have my feet flopping like that. I'm actually pushing with my feet, pulsing with it. Very important that you can do that. And you just crawl forward. And then you crawl backwards. Just like that. This is an excellent way of training core and training your posterior chain, which is your butt, your hamstrings, and your upper back. Now, you may or may not notice I'm 180 degrees out of phase with my limbs. So as my left leg comes forward, my right arm comes forward. As my left arm comes forward, my right leg comes forward. Don't overthink it if you do this. Just move. If you think about it too much, you'll probably move each limb on each side at the same time, and you don't want to do that. Okay, now, before you get into a plank, I always like people to do a few basic stretches that are good. This is called child's pose. So you just rock back on the heels. You push into the mat with your upper body. And this is a good upper back stretch. This is a good hamstring, hip stretch as well. And then, I always tell people, you want to have the antagonist muscle group, which is the opposite muscle group, get stretched as well. So that would be coming forward, what we call the dolphin here. You bring your hips towards the ground, engage your glute muscles, your butt muscles. And then rock back again. Into child's pose, okay? That's a good way to get loose here. And fucking shoot. Allergies are still killing me, but I'm doing much better. All right. Okay, so we're gonna do a full plank now, a hard style plank. So you get into quadruped position here. First thing you should notice, there should be space between the legs. There should be space between the hands. Now, you're gonna want to put your hands just below your pecs. Just like that, okay? First move is you go to the forearms. Now, these forearms need to be straight, okay? The other thing is, if you are on a mat like I am, make sure you're using the whole entire mat. You don't want your feet halfway on the mat, halfway off. So once you get the forearms on the ground, you're gonna bring one leg back, then the other leg back. You're gonna have your glutes tight, your abs tight, and you're just gonna hold that position right there. Now you notice everything's in alignment. My elbows are lined up with my wrists. My butt's engaged, my abs engaged. And the goal of this is to hold this for 30 seconds. So I'm gonna hold this for another 15. Keep breathing the whole entire time. You should feel a real tightness between the butt and the abs. You want to sustain this muscle contraction, be able to hold it for 30 seconds. And okay, that is your hard style plank. One thing to keep in mind, you want to have those elbows, like I said, under the chest. You want to have everything straight here. You don't want flared elbows. You don't want diagonal forearm to elbows. You want everything perfectly lined up there, okay? So that is your hard style plank, okay? There's a lot of other movements that increase core strength. Any questions so far about the plank, the hard style plank? Now let me know if there is. There is a modified way of doing this. You don't necessarily have to jump to the hard style, which is what I just showed you. There is another modified way of doing it, in which same thing, you start off in that quadruped position, you go down to the forearm, same thing, but instead of pushing off the feet and engaging the toes, you can bend the knees at 90 degrees and hold that position right there. Now, this is obviously harder than leaning against a wall with a chair. It could be about the same, but it's definitely not as hard as the full hard style plank where you have your weight on your toes. Balls your feet, I should say. Okay? All right, that's the plank. How long should you do a plank? I always do about 30 seconds with my students. Now, I gotta tell you a quick story. One day when I was teaching my general conditioning class, one of my students walks up to me and says, "Hey, Scott, we shouldn't do planks anymore." And I laughed and I'm like, "Why should we not do planks anymore?" And my student tells me, "Oh, I just read an article about how bad it is for you." And immediately red flags went up in my brain because, I try to stay as current as I can on this stuff. And I'm like, I don't recall reading any article about plank being a bad thing, right? So my student starts talking to me and says, "Oh yeah, you should read this article." So she sends me the link and I read the article and I realize it isn't that the plank is bad, it's that some trainers are having their clients plank, forget this, 5 minutes long. And I'm just like, well, no wonder. You don't want to plank for 5 minutes, because if you plank for 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you right now, you are probably not using your core effectively, your abdominals. You're probably relying on the shoulders, the pecs to hold you in place. And if that's the case, it's not really a plank anymore. So that's why I caution to all my students, you want to do this for 30 seconds. Yes, if you're really well conditioned, maybe you can do a minute, but do not attempt a minute. And for 99% of you, just 30 seconds. 30 seconds is plenty. Okay? So hopefully that will answer any questions you might have about the duration. How many should you do a day? I would just do 2 30-second plank holds for a day. That's plenty. You don't even have to do that every day. You can do that every other day. All right, so hopefully I addressed intensity and duration. All right, now the next thing to work on is something called the dead bug. But before we get to the dead bug, I want to start with a really simple movement called the pelvic bridge. Now, you can perform the pelvic bridge on the ground, obviously. I recommend you probably do this on a mat, but it's got to be firm. It shouldn't be too soft. All right, now you notice my knees are at 90 degrees. My feet are pushing into the ground, and my back needs to be flat. If it arches like this and I can get my hand under there, that's not good. You want to tilt the pelvis. See how I did that? I tilted my pelvis forward and I flattened my lower back. That is called neutral spine. That is the position you want to be in as you perform anything on your back that's core related, including the pelvic bridge, which is what we're going to work on right now. So on a pelvic bridge, what is the objective of the pelvic bridge? The objective of the pelvic bridge is to increase strength in the butt muscles, the hamstrings, and you called it the abdominals, okay? Now, when people ask me, is the pelvic bridge a core exercise? I always say yes, even though its primary objective is to strengthen your legs, basically, your butt muscles and your hamstrings. In order for this to effectively work in terms of quality of movement, you do have to have your abs engaged. If your abs are not engaged, then you're not properly performing this exercise. And if there's anything I want you to take home today from this lecture, is the understanding that you definitely need to be able to strengthen your abs or stabilize your spine by contracting your abdominals when you're lifting weights, when you're moving, regardless of whatever it is you're doing. It's crucial that you know how to use your abdominals. This prevents back pain and any type of injuries you could occur to your spine. Okay, let's get back on the back here. Now, pelvic bridge is pretty simple. You bring your arms down to the side. You make sure your back is flat. Like I said, if there's an arch there, tilt your pelvis slightly forward. Okay, see that's increase. What we call, I guess, anterior pelvic tilt. And then to get it to posterior, to flatten that out, look, you just tilt the pelvis forward like this, and that flattens everything right out. Okay? That's the position you want to be in. It's called neutral spine. Now, let your arms rest down to the side here. And now the goal here, this shouldn't be super hard, but it should be just moderately intense. So you're going to push into the ground with the feet. You're going to contract your butt muscles and your abdominals. There should be that symbiotic relationship between those different muscle groups. Push into the ground with the feet, lift those hips up, and now there is space between my butt, my lower back, and the ground. See how my hand can go up and down? That is the position you want to be in. The other thing is, I'm going to come down slowly here. You want to make sure your feet are relatively straight. You don't want to have your feet turned way out like that. You want your feet forward. You're going to push into the ground, contract the butt and abdominals, lift the hips up off the ground, and then back down, okay? So this is the pelvic bridge. You're lifting those hips up and down, just like that. Now, the next question is, how do you progress this movement? It's actually quite simple. You go up into the bridge and you start doing different things like a single leg bridge. See how I'm moving from the hip here? Alternate legs, lift the other leg up and then down. Up and down, up and down. Now, remember, there's space between my butt and the ground here. So whenever I lift the leg up, butt and hamstrings, and of course your abs have to work on the leg that's on the ground, okay? Back and forth. This is a great way to strengthen the posterior part of your body as well as the abdominals. What is the purpose of having a stronger posterior chain? Well, you have less knee pain, you have less reliance on the front part of your legs. And like I've talked about in the past, okay, go ahead and relax. Like I've talked about in the past, in regards to hips, the stronger your muscles are in the back of your legs, the healthier your knees and more stable the knees are going to be. The other thing is having strong butt muscles is important because it's a 360-degree muscle. It allows you to move laterally either direction. So that's the advantage of having a good posterior chain strength, butt, hamstrings. And of course, it relates to your core or your abdominals. Now, I'm oftentimes a little bit hesitant when I do a talk like this to call it a talk on core or a talk on just abdominals, because when you're talking about abdominal strengthening, you're not just talking about the abdominals here. You're also talking about how the rest of the muscles on the human body work with them. And that's the key here, is that you're able to integrate it with all the other movements that you do. So, what we're going to cover next.
How many
is-
times?
Yes?
How many times do you do it?
What's that?
How many times do you do that?
Oh, the pelvic bridge, which I just did.
Uh-huh.
I would do probably, if you're a starter, maybe 2 or 3 sets of 12. And the things you want to look out for is make sure your hamstrings aren't cramping. For people that don't have a lot of strength in their hamstrings and you haven't really worked at this, you might have to cut that down to 5 or 6 reps. The other thing to be aware of is you're drinking enough water and fluids. That makes a big difference too. And sometimes if your hamstrings cramp there, you might just have to roll them out a little bit. But yeah, generally speaking, I would do 3 sets of 12. And then try to progress to that next level, which I just showed you there. We call that the multifidus or the march. And I would do that for about 30 seconds, or try to work up to 30 seconds. And you could do that for 2 sets. That's plenty of work right there. And that's a good starting point for anyone who's maybe hasn't done a lot of work for their hamstrings and their butt muscles. It's a good starting point. And I'm telling you, if you have any type of pain in the front of your knees, I guarantee you start doing this stuff, and within a month, your knees are going to feel better, for sure. You'll notice a difference.
And Scott,
Okay.
what about when you put a block between your knees?
Yeah, very easily. In fact, if you have a yoga block, I'll get one of those. That's a good thing. You don't necessarily have to have a yoga block. You could also have a ball. So here's the yoga block. You can put the yoga block here between the knees, and that's a good way to line things up. I do that with people where maybe one knee is kind of caving in. And that's a good example. If I teach someone how to do a pelvic bridge and I see one knee caving in like that, I already know their butt muscles, especially their glute medius on the side, is not working hard enough. So yeah, you put one of these guys here and you perform pelvic bridging, just like that. Now, it's a little different when you're doing the higher level stuff, like the multifidus, which I showed you. That you can't really do with a yoga block for obvious reasons, because the block will slide out. Now, let's say you don't have a yoga block. You can use a little cheap beach ball, same effect. Okay? So whatever you have, I highly encourage you to use. I suppose I should mention one other thing. I don't know how many of you are experiencing when you're trying to do a pelvic bridge and maybe one knee's collapsing inwards like that, the clamshells are an excellent exercise for preventing that from happening. So, what is a clamshell? So, see the position I'm getting into here? I wouldn't call it the fetal position, but it's a little bit like that. You're going to have 90 degrees in your hips, 90 degrees in your knees. I always prefer people put a yoga block underneath the head because you want to stabilize the spine. You don't want to, make your neck muscles achy in any way. And what we're going to be strengthening is this muscle right here. And you notice how I'm stacked equally. So my left knee is on top of my right knee and my feet are equally stacked on top of each other. So you contract that butt muscle, you lift the hip up, you lift the leg up and down just like that. That's called the clamshell.
Scott, is there an aid so that you're not rolling forward when you're doing a clamshell?
Well, you shouldn't really roll forward because if you're rolling forward, you're probably trying to swing your way through this movement using your torso. So what I would probably do is just get in this position and try to get whatever movement you can from your hip. And I understand for some of you, you might have a neuro disease or something that is adversely affecting your hip stability. You should still try to do it. I would just try to get whatever range of motion you can out of it. Maybe you only get about an inch between the knees and down. That's a good starting point. But typically the reason why you get that movement forward or backwards is because you're turning your whole entire body. See what I'm doing? How my torso's turning? That's not the way you'd want to perform. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought someone had a question there. So yeah, so now for some of you that this might be an easy movement for you because body weight's easy on this. You could put a mini band around the legs. In fact, let me show you how that works. And typically you want to do both sides. I'm just showing you the left side, my left side, but you just flip around and go the other way for the other side. Okay, generally speaking, these mini bands, they come in 3 different colors. I'll show you. We've got these in our strength room. So typically what you see, and it's a lot like martial arts, yellow band is the easiest, like yellow belt. Then you got green, which is harder, middle of the road. Then you got blue, and in most cases, this is the hardest, but they do have black, which is really tough. Okay, so I'm going to put the green on. And I'm going to slide back a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Now, this is kind of tricky because the band tends to twist. So what I do is I get it around that one ankle first. Then I slip it around the other. And I just very carefully take my time here and move this all the way up. Now you see how the band's around my upper knees? You see that? So I'm going to go back to that same side I was on. I'm going to put the yoga block underneath my head. And I'm going to be 90 degrees here in the knees. So what you do is quite simple. Using that same muscle group, you bring the leg up and down. And now I have resistance here. Now, I'll be honest with you, for most of you out there, you're going to notice a disparity in strength between either your left hip and your right hip or your right hip and your left hip. One of them is going to be stronger than the other. And I highly encourage you to strengthen the side that's weaker. So you just lift that leg up. Now, I don't need to go any higher than this because I can really feel this glute medius muscle working right there. That's all it really takes. And I've got plenty of resistance here, and I'm not turning my torso to execute this movement, okay? Now, how do you train the other side? Well, it's pretty simple. You simply switch it around, you get on this side, you just lay down there, and you're using that glute medius on the other side. And same thing, you just lift that leg up and down, just like that. Like I said, pretty simple stuff. And that's what you want to do if you're having trouble on the pelvic bridge and you see one knee collapsing inwards. This is what you want to do. This is called a clamshell. Okay, any questions so far? Please let me know now, because I'm going to move on to the dead bug, which is a higher level exercise. And just
How many of those, Scott, and how many reps?
well, I mean, that largely depends on the individual and how much you can do on an affected side.
Don't worry about it. It's not gonna work.
So what typically happens is, let's say for instance, you're only able to do 3 or 4 repetitions, then just work in that 3 or 4 repetition range and try to get in 2 or 3 sets. I mean, that's what you need to do. That's a good starting point. What you can do is just try to strengthen that over time, try to get that up to 6 or 8 reps. And then, you'll progress a lot more over time. The key to it is you just need to be patient with yourself and see if you can do 2 sets and possibly work up to 3 sets. And, the objective here is just to improve, just to get stronger. It's not about comparing yourself to any one person other than you. That's always what it is. So for me to give you a rigid number, I'd have to know who I'm working with. But like I said, find out how many reps you can do, stick to that rep range, try to get in 3 sets. Okay, I'm going to put this stuff back, and then I'm going to show you the dead bug. Now, I like the dead bug a lot because the dead bug is one of those exercises where it's contralateral in nature, just like walking. So, let me move this camera here a little bit. So, when you walk, that doesn't work. So, when you are walking, you take a step. The left leg comes forward, the right arm swings forward. Okay? That's called contralateral, because when we walk, we don't have the limb, each leg, and each arm walking at the same time like that. That would look really weird, right? When we walk, when that left leg comes forward, the right arm swings. When the right leg comes forward, the left arm swings. Okay? That's what natural walking will look like. Now, the dead bug operates along those same lines. So, same position we've been in. This is the dead bug position. You're going to have 90 degrees in the knee, 90 degrees in the hip, just like that, okay? Now, you're going to go 90 degrees in the elbows. Now, this is where it's really tricky, because when I teach people this movement, they add more movement than what's necessary. So let's just focus on each joint at a time. The elbow joints, you see my elbow joint here? The only movement is you're straightening the elbow and you're bending the elbow. But the key here is you want a straight line between the elbow and that shoulder. So if I had a magic marker and I'm drawing on the screen, that should be a straight line, okay? Now, conversely, on the lower body, same thing. You want the knee completely in line with the hip. If you have the knees close to the torso, well, that takes the load off your abs. If you have your knees way too far away from your torso and it's not a straight line, now your lower back gets stressed. So, straight line between the knee and the hip, straight line between the elbow and the shoulder. Okay, how does this work now once it's in motion? Number one, make sure your back is flat, your abdominals are engaged. If there's space there, then maybe you got to tilt your pelvis forward to flatten that back out, stabilize your spine. Once again, that is the purpose of having core strength, is to be able to stabilize the spine. So as you're doing this, you're going to extend the left knee and extend the right arm. Literally that slow. Bring it back to 90 degrees. Extend the right knee, extend the left arm, bring it back to 90. Okay? This is exactly how it should look. Nice and slow. Now look, not everyone can straighten their knees completely. And the reason is if you're tight in your hamstrings, that's going to be a limiting factor. Okay? So you just keep that back flat. Now, to answer your question beforehand, Jerry, I would do this, try to do this 45 seconds. Now, you may not be able to do 45 seconds at first. That's quite all right. So stick to whatever you can do. It might be as few as 15 seconds, might be as much as 30 seconds. Okay, and then eventually just try to work up to 45 seconds. And I would just do this 2 sets. That's more than enough. You want that quality movement. And notice how slow I'm moving. Now, oftentimes when I teach people this movement the first time, you know what I get? Just wildness everywhere, right? That's not what I'm asking for. I want to see straight leg, straight knee, straight elbow back to 90, straight knee, straight elbow back to 90. Okay? That is the dead bug. That's a crucial exercise to do for core strength and also contralateral movement. Okay. All right. So any questions so far on that movement? Because I'm going to show you one more thing and then I'm going to do some more Q&A before I wrap things up. Okay, next one is called Eldoa. To spell it, it's Eldoa. Eldoa. Now, Eldoa, without getting too far, off the page here, was started by a doctor who's lives in France, and he devised a whole system of stretching and strengthening that, by using your muscles effectively, you actually create faceted space in your spine. So, meaning increasing space between the vertebrae. That's the most important thing, especially as we age, because if your musculature isn't working and functioning properly, what will happen is your spine will start to collapse on itself. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you maintain space between your spine. And that's why not sitting all the time is so important, because people that sit for very long periods of time, that's exactly what happens. Your vertebrae space starts to narrow. And that's why you see so many people with herniated discs that have never been in car accidents, because they lose their musculature in their spine and they sit too much and things tend to collapse. That's why people shrink as they get older. Of course, posture plays a big role in that. So this is an exercise that's going to help prevent that. And it's very similar to the dead bug I just showed you. Now, this is a high level, a more complex exercise. But if you're able to do it, it has a lot of lasting benefits. Okay, so how does this work? Same setup as dead bug. You want your back flat. You want your knees at 90 degrees. Except this time, instead of elbows being at 90 degrees, you're going to take your left hand, put it on the right thigh, right hand, put it on the left thigh. Now, I'm going to walk you through this very slowly. What you're going to do is extend that right leg out, okay? Excuse me, extend the left leg out. You're going to push the right arm overhead, and you want to pretend like you're holding a pizza pie. I don't know if you can see my right hand's turned out. That's external rotation. My back is flat. You're going to bring that leg up, back to 90 degrees. Then we go the opposite direction. You push the right leg out, press the left arm overhead, just like you're holding a pizza pie with that left hand, bring it up, back to 90 degrees. So same thing, right hand overhead, left leg push straight out, bring it up, back to 90, push that right leg out, left arm overhead, Bring it up. Back to 90. Now, this is the tempo or pace you should perform this. I'm gonna do about 4 here. You'll really feel this in your abdominals. You want to breathe all the way through. All right. Okay, that's called the Eldoa. Now I realize that's an advanced exercise, but I wanted to show you the most simple to the more complex. So you have an understanding of how to actually progress these movements. So you have a much stronger core. Now, I suppose there is one more thing I should talk to you about before I wrap things up, is breathing. Breathing is absolutely crucial. So many of us are not breathing properly. If you're a person who has a dry mouth all the time and you constantly feel dehydrated, there is a good chance you're not actually breathing through your nose, you're mostly breathing through your mouth. Now, there's going to be a little bit of both that occurs, that's perfectly fine. You just want to make sure that you are breathing through the diaphragm, which means a certain amount of air has to come in through your nose. So we're going to practice a little bit of breathing before we wrap things up here. You want to have safe position. I always like to teach this from the ground because it's much easier to feel what's going on with the diaphragm. So keeping the back flat. Now I always tell people to leave a hand on your abdominal. And the reason why, as you take a long deep breath through your nose, which is what we're going to do, you're going to feel your stomach rise. So inhale. You'll feel your stomach push out. Now exhale through the mouth. Now you feel your abdominals decrease. So we're going to breathe again through our nose, take a long deep breath. You'll feel your stomach expand. And then as you exhale through the mouth, your stomach decreases. Once again, let's inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Do 2 more. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. All right, that's proper breathing. Now, how do you apply proper breathing? Let's say you're going to lift something very heavy, right? Let's say, for instance, you're going to pull something up off the ground. I'm going to move this back a little bit to the original view that we had. There we go. Okay, I'm going to grab something that weighs, close to 30 pounds. This is called a Viper. You notice there's handles here on each end. Let's say I'm picking this up off the ground, okay? I'm going to get into a hinge, bring my butt back. I'm going to inhale, exhale as I stand up, okay? I'll show you from the front view. Push into the ground. First you inhale, and as you exert yourself, exhale. Okay, I'll show you from the other side. Same thing. Picking something up from the ground, you want your butt back. As I exert myself, I'm exhaling. But first you have to inhale. Inhale. Exhale. Push into the ground, stand up. Okay? So anytime you're doing anything, any type of physical exertion, even if I'm, say, pressing this overhead. As I press overhead, first you inhale. And as I press, exhale, come down, okay? Inhale. Exhale. Press, come down, okay? So it's really important. If some of you are confused about breathing, just imagine for a minute you're gonna push your car, okay? To push your car, you would inhale, exhale, push. You would not inhale and push your car at the same time. So it's pretty logical stuff. If you don't overthink it, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm gonna put this back. And I'm gonna answer questions now. If any of you have any questions, any particular questions you may want to ask me, please do so.
Are crunches good for core strength?
I'm so glad you asked me that. Who asked me that?
Joanne,
Joanne, you get an A+ today.
I've heard they're
That's
bad.
a fantastic. What's that?
I've heard they're bad.
They are bad. Now, they didn't used to be bad, but now they're bad. Isn't that funny how exercise is? You know, you start off and they tell you, oops, did I do something wrong here?
No, you're good.
I thought I did something wrong here. So what I was gonna say is, the reason why crunches are bad, well, aside from the obvious, people pull on their neck, but aside from that, most people that have some type of degenerative disease to their vertebrae have what we call a narrowing of space. I talked about this earlier, where your spine starts to collapse on you. The problem with a crunch is you're just compressing the anterior part of your vertebrae. And look, most of us as we get older, our bodies start to go forward. So you don't want to reinforce this tighter movement, right? You're much better off with a plank. You're much better off with dead bug. You're much better off engaging your abdominals in what I call functional movement. You definitely want to do exercises that lengthen your spine, don't compress your spine per se. Now, look, I'm not going to say every single exercise lengthens your spine. There are some exercises that will compress it a little bit temporarily. So let's say you have a bunch of weight on your back and you squat, okay? You will experience some type of compression from a movement like that, but it's okay because if you're doing pull-ups where you're hanging and pulling yourself up, you are lengthening your spine again, okay? Same thing, that's why I prefer a deadlift. You're pushing into the ground, you're making yourself longer, taller. That's an exercise that I think is really appropriate for most people. Squats with a bar on your back isn't always the best way to do it, but you don't have to put a bar on your back. That's the beauty of it. You can take a weight. I'm going to grab a random weight I have here. You can hold that weight right here, just like that. And you can squat. Same thing. You've loaded your hips. You've loaded your spine, but you're not compressing the spine. Okay? So that's the best way to do it. Just hold the weight in front of you, squat that way, or just do a body weight squat. You don't necessarily have to hold weight. Body weight squats are excellent too. A lot of different ways you can do it. You can leave your feet out in front and squat. I'll show you from the side view, just like that. Now the key to this is you want to make sure you have some length to your spine as you're squatting. But body weight squats work good too. Okay, I hope I answered that question. Any other questions?
Yes, Scott, can I do those exercises on my bed? It's Tony.
Hi, Tony. It depends largely on how firm your mattress is. If you're on a water bed and every time you move, bloop, bloop, this sort of thing happens, or you
No
have a
water
really
bed.
soft mattress and it just collapses on you, that I would not recommend.
Okay, I have no waterbed.
Yeah, just make sure you have enough firmness in your mattress. That'll help.
Okay, it's easier than getting on the floor. Well, it's easier than
Yeah,
up off the floor. Thanks, Scott.
yeah, for sure. All right, any other questions?
Thanks a lot. It was great.
Oh, thank you, Tina. My pleasure.
Thank you, Scott. That was wonderful. Always.
Thank you.
Don't forget to travel to London the next session. Thank you. Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
everyone, enjoy the London Bridge.
Scott.
Bye, Scott.
All right, everyone. For some of you, I'll see you in 2 minutes.